afternoon. Do you want to settle down for a minute and then we start? Hi, my name is Vikas, and I work for a 78-year-old company, so not exactly the kind you would call a startup. We're a company called Lintas, which has been building ads in India since 1939, and within that organization, I run a company which is exactly 93 days old today. So we're a company called PointNine Lintas, which is essentially trying to build marketing solutions for an experience economy. And what I wanted to talk to you about was that we've spoken a lot of aspects of go-to-market in a sense of where do you get your first customer from or where your first set of captive audience comes from. But I want to talk about when you've crossed that stage and you are looking at from a startup to a scale-up now. And when the challenge comes to get rapid consumer adoption, when you're trying to grow your base, essentially subjects like brand building, marketing, and scale become very, very important. So how many founders do we have in the room right now? And how many of you think marketing is something that you do as a part of your day job? How many of you have a marketing team that actually works with you or do a marketing job yourself? Excellent. So I hope a lot of you reach a stage soon when you have a marketing function, and you will be dealing with this animal called the Chief Marketing Officer, who's very likely to be working for you and telling you what's the right way of doing things, because he or she has obviously built stellar stories, worked with great people like Pops, and built campaigns that are memorable and are part of country's cultural fabric, literally. But there's another side to it, and when I started my career at the beginning of this century, being a CMO used to be one of the coolest jobs you could have. And it remains so, but what our changing environment has also done is created a lot of pressure on who CMOs are and what they do. This is something, and Korn Ferry is one of the largest headhunting firms on the planet. And they did this survey in the American market where they actually figured out that among the entire CXO fraternity, a CMO is actually the shortest tenure of all roles that exists. From US, you jump to UK, and this was a study done again where over the last 14 or 15 years, the CMO tenure has actually shrunk to a little more than 2 years in the UK market. Again, sticking with UK, and this was a survey done by Marketing Week a couple of, about 8 months ago. And this was scary that 1/4 of all marketers, 1/4 of all CMOs are actually unhappy with their jobs today. And 81% of them are actually thinking about getting into something else in the next 3 years. The world's largest brand, Coca-Cola, actually just did away with the CMO role altogether earlier this year. And Forrester, which is another human resource research firm, actually did a study that forecasted that almost 1/3 of every CMO is likely to lose her job within the next 1 year. So while there's not a room full of marketers, and I normally do this in those forums, but I think it's important to understand that the whole subject of marketing seems to be coming under threat because of the entire environment that has seismically changed over the last 10 years. And like we were talking about some of the stuff that Pops was showing earlier in the afternoon, it's looking like all the rules and all the success formulas that you learned and perfected are no longer working. So we actually did some thinking about it and said, hang on, is this really a new threat? And when you want to find out if something's new, the best place to go is actually go back in history and see where the evolution has been. And this question was asked even half a century ago. This gentleman was a co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, and he really said that marketing is too important to be left to the marketers. And I'm sure a lot of founders in the room agree with that. You're not wrong. And this is one of the renowned marketing gurus, if you've heard of Al Ries and Jack Trout. Again, this was 50 years ago, we're talking 7 years ago. The narrative hasn't changed. This is 2011. Of course, the entire decibel about how digital is changing everything, including marketing. I'm talking 2016. Suddenly now you're saying, you know what, digital is no longer, marketers are no longer good enough to do digital. It's actually the CEO's job, because you know what, when you have to transform your whole organization around the digital realities, it's a lot more than marketing. You're right. Then comes social media. And we started saying the same thing. So if you look at it purely from a consumer adoption point of view, and therefore marketing becomes relevant to your organization, it's essentially boiling down to everybody having a voice to the consumer, and therefore everybody being a marketer. But you know what? Here's the actual problem. And because, you know what, 30 years ago, when somebody put a great TV commercial on air, you asked your mother how she felt about it, she will have a view. But so would your 5-year-old. And you could always argue saying, you know what, they're both consumers in some shape or form, so they're right, and that's what makes all of us believe that we understand marketing, and more importantly, and sometimes to our own peril, we're damn good at it. But if you just break it down to the environment in which marketers live today, there is 3 factors that's making their lives ridiculously difficult. And as people who probably manage some of them, I would urge you to have some empathy towards it. And this is not rocket science that I'm about to tell you, but look at it from a marketer's point of view, and it makes things really challenging, because the subject matter of technology, and that's the first one. Today, it's the environment, it's the tool, it's the platform, and it is the disruptor. And most marketers were not trained to deal with technology at such a deep core level. That's the other big problem, and we were talking about decision journeys even earlier. Awareness, interest, desire, action is not how simple they are. They're not even linear. Even the non-linear journeys are not the same across any 2 customers. And you're talking about dealing with millions and millions of customers simultaneously, who are all probably taking their own different paths to the buying decision towards your product. And the one marketing machinery now has to deal with the exponential multitude of those experiential journeys. Now imagine you are running a company where you have an install base of 10 million customers. Try devising a plan that will work for 40% of them, given that within those 4 million customers, you're likely to be encountering 250,000 user journeys. Think about the complexity that we've put upon the marketing function and the brand building subject. So this is the second big challenge which most marketers were just not trained for. And here's the third one. You talk about proliferation of touch points when it comes to user interface. There is also within that a huge proliferation of touch points on how the hell can you reach that customer. And this is a 5-year-old slide. I haven't updated it because the number of logos that now need to go on it cannot fit on a slide. But you literally have hundreds of different ways to reach and engage with the same customer available to you, and I'm just talking digital communication here. Add to that experiential, add to that devices, add to that broadcast, and our television industry itself is a 600-channel environment, which itself is complex. So every technology that comes up in this space is trying to convince us that now I'm giving you one more way to reach your customer. But the corollary of it is equally true, that each of these is now a new layer that stands between a brand and a consumer, and now I have to navigate this literally like a rat in a maze. And when you put all the 3 together, marketing is a really hard job to do today. So I'm going to share with you, among the 50,000 things that have changed, there are a few fundamental principles which are like at the foundation of winning consumers' hearts and minds, which we believe have not changed. So I've tried to distill it down to 4 or 5 things, and I'm just going to jump into it as things you should keep in mind as you're thinking about how to build a scalable brand that's going to continue winning in the marketplace. Because a go-to-market strategy that starts with, I've got the critical mass, the POC, the MVP, and the Series B funding. What happens after is the challenge which I would like to probably advise you to keep some of these things in mind as you get to that stage of your journey. So here's the first one, and it's probably the most fundamental one, that we are all in the service industry. Whether you make a toothpaste or a technology that maps people's genes, everything that we do has a service aspect to it, because the sheer opportunity that our consumers have to experience us has gone beyond just the physical product we supply to them. So, and when you're talking and looking at your own product portfolio from that lens, you have to understand that whether you're a manufacturer of goods or a provider of services, what's equally important as goods and services that you make is to be good as an organization and provide something that's a valuable service to your customer. I'm going to talk to you about an example from a very small category. I mean, this is killing cockroaches and insects, right? And it's a very, very low penetration category in India. We have more pests than the kind of disinfectants we use in our houses. But within that small category, HIT is probably the largest brand in the country with 70+% market share. And it's been around in that shape or form for the last 20 years. Now, the transition that this brand had to make to, despite being a manufacturer of a product, into something that could actually be good and provide a service to people, was the genesis of something we started about 2 years ago. So I'll tell you a story. This was basically around World Malaria Day, and every company who's a respectable player in the mosquito repellent or anti-pest business wants to put out a Facebook post about it, or put out a print ad in the old days about it and tell people, you know what, happy Malaria Day, we are hit. We said, instead of burning $500,000 in putting ads, which people will forget the next day, why don't we actually do something that's core to why we exist? So if, as a company, I'm in the business of killing pests, I know that my products can only protect you when you're indoors. And most people are indoors probably 30% of their lives. What about the remaining 70% where the product HIT cannot protect you from insects? So we said, while I can't go and spray cans of HIT on the whole planet, because that will probably also destroy the planet, but why don't we actually do something that fulfills the same promise where I cannot go as a product? So we actually built this platform called Track the Bite. It was a simple API that was sitting as a layer on top of Google Maps. We aggregated data from various health ministries and departments, which was all incompatible, but we found a way to make it all compatible. And actually built a nationwide geotag database of dengue and malaria infestation incidences that were happening in the country. Now, the moment you put that together and make it available to people, magic started happening, because suddenly when you were arriving at a location, this app was able to send you a notification saying, you know what, you're going towards Andheri East, there have been 5 cases of dengue, please be careful. More importantly, and then once you've started getting used to the idea, users started contributing to the content, and 6 months and about 200,000 users later, we accidentally realized that we've built the largest disease alert system that exists in India. So I'll skip the details of it because I know we are running ridiculously behind time for the rest of the session, but it was essentially the entire journey. Look at it from trying to solve a problem for your users, and don't just target them as targets in a war who buy your product and then the journey is over. So the first point, Even if you're in the business of goods and services as a company, try and be good and provide a service, because that goes a long way in building affinity and bonds that will outlast the marketing dollars that you have. Here's the second one. And given everybody's connected and sometimes over vocal on social media and has access to all the information about you 24/7, there will be times you will fuck it up as a company. It probably in a B2B environment is far more harsh, because then probably you're out of business. But think of a consumer business where you're dealing again with millions of customers. Chances are, see, and service delivery is a fragile thing. It's down to the hands of the last mile, of the last human being providing the last smallest bit of that service. There will be times you won't be perfect. But you know what? Again, in marketing we were trained to never get it wrong. I think the reality in which we live today, we should embrace the fact that we'll never get it right. Stop trying to be perfect. Let's start at least being authentic, because when you do that, people are as forgiving as you want them to be, as long as they know that you're doing the right thing and you're being authentic about it. So I'm going to show you an example from a category which actually has to interface with hundreds of millions of people on a daily basis, providing a one-on-one service. This is an example from Starbucks, and how many of you have been to a Starbucks in the last 1 week? And how many times do you remember the man or the woman behind the counter spelling your name wrong on a mug? Not getting the spelling right, right? And as a company, Starbucks can spend millions and millions of dollars training the 3 million baristas and partners, as they call them, that they have manning those counters. It's impossible virtually to bring that error rate down to 0. And every time you see your name spelled wrong on a cup, you do get a bit pissed off for a moment, and then you move on, right? Now, as a company, if Starbucks was presented with this problem, the logical response would be, how do I put in a mechanism to reduce error rate? Well, they did the exact opposite, and I'm going to show you an example.
I'm the one who writes your name in black marker on your Starbucks cup. I probably write around 500 customers' names every day. Recently, it's come to my attention that people aren't always satisfied with the names I've written. In fact, many people say the names are often wildly inaccurate. They want to know why I can never get it right.
Allow me to explain why. I am fucking with you.
My name should be Trouble.
I didn't mishear your name. I'm deliberately misspelling your name to confuse and annoy you.
It's the best part of my job, and I will never stop.
Let me assure you, everyone in the world knows how to spell Jessica. Literally everyone. I decided to write Jessica on your cup to play with your emotions in a shrewd and calculating way. And it worked. You posted about it on Instagram, Twitter, and Vine.
So sorry you didn't go viral. I'm in your head now.
When I hear a customer's name, I immediately think, how can I spell this name in an obnoxious way that will infuriate and perplex them? For example, instead of Chris, writing Chris. It's a small change, but people still hate it.
Other times, I like to really fuck with people by spelling their name in a way that barely contains any of the correct letters. Like that time I spelled Nikol instead of Michael. Oh man, that guy almost had a mental breakdown when he saw that.
It's a sad world, but we all have to live. What's wrong?
Poor Nikol.
But every once in a while, I'll spell your name correctly. You'll pick up your order and be delighted to discover that your name was spelled right today. you'll think things might be looking up for you.
That's what I want you to think. I'm lulling you into a false sense of security. This isn't over. It's never over. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
John.
Thanks, John.
So, it's all right if you don't get it right, as long as sometimes it's okay to have a sense of humor about yourself, and chances are people will play along with you rather than against you. I now want to talk about something a little more frivolous, and I think this is a disease of the marketing industry. We genuinely have invented a syntax where we put a new prefix to the word marketing and try and tell you, you know what, this is a whole new science. And again, if I had more time, I could have plotted maybe 30 more words on this chart. This is debris. People will try and convince you that, you know what, you need all these 37 skill sets to be a marketer. Sometimes you do. It's very unlikely that you'll need all of them at any given point of time. It's likely that you will probably deploy some of these all the time. But you know what's most important? It's okay if you don't understand all of them, because you don't have to. What you need to essentially understand is, what is it that I mean, you know what your company stands for, right? Just find a version of that same truth that people who are not as involved and geeky as yourself will relate to, which happens to be your consumers. And marketing is nothing but means to start telling those stories to people in a manner where it'll keep them engaged. And chances are, they'll stay with you. Companies used to get away with a lot of stuff once upon a time. We could, and that entire generation where everybody was talking about going green, and we actually used to call that a green wash, where you could be an oil company, but you could put out a $3 billion global campaign talking about how environmentally responsible you are, and you would get away with it. Unfortunately, there are millions of eyes watching what you do as a company all the time, and the more successful and larger that you become, that attention is only going to go up. So it's very important to not fall for the marketing cliche of making false promises. It sure as hell is going to backfire, and in fact it's far more important to know that only make promises as a brand that you're convinced you can keep as a company. There's no point talking about women empowerment when the gender ratio in your own company is 90% men. So it's not necessarily about your brand, but it's got to actually even percolate down to what you do as a company. I'm actually going to show you an example from another very non-tech category. It's skateboarding. The market is Europe, the country is Spain, and skateboarding is a very, very small niche industry, and this company happens to be the largest maker of skateboards in the country. And they had a simple growth hack challenge, which was, every skateboarder already uses me. Now, how do I get new people into the sport? Simple market category development task. At the same time, what they also knew was the fact that while the number of skateboarders is very, very small, the passion levels in every skateboarder about skateboarding is extremely high. So how do you do something that actually feels like you're championing a cause, something that every skateboarder feels very, very strongly about? And do that in a manner that you will deliver the goods as a company, not just put out messages about delivering the goods. So here's what they did. They put their entire marketing budget into doing one thing, which is lobbying the Olympic Council around the world to accept skateboarding as a sport. And strangely enough, last year they succeeded. Here's a case.
This August, the International Olympic Committee will decide if skateboarding will be part of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. That's why Nomad, Spain's biggest skateboarding brand, decided to support the cause by lighting its own Olympic torch and taking it straight to Tokyo. Just like the official Olympic torch that travels from one city to the next until it reaches the host city, our torch started its journey in Zaragoza, Spain, where the brand was born, and ended in Tokyo. Traveling the only way possible, by skateboarding. One board and 8 skaters riding towards one dream, through Spain, France, Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, Russia, China, and of course, Japan. As this journey moved forward, skaters who opposed the Olympics started talking, and that helped the conversation grow around the world, letting a local brand lead a global debate. When the last skater finally reached Tokyo, the city voiced its unanimous approval, and the torch was lit. But our board had one more stop to make: the headquarters of the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne. Over the course of the journey, supporters, haters, and the whole world could follow the torch at MakeSkateOlympic.com, where our torchbearers also shared their experience. And the debate it triggered ended up in a 20-minute documentary film that's been seen by thousands of people already. Our torch set the debate on fire,
Skateboarding to join the Olympic Games.
and we hope it'll make a difference next August.
It's very likely going to be in the 2020 games.
That's why our petition is still open, and our hope is still lit. Because where else should skateboarding go but forward?
The last one. And I think the kind of organizations that probably this group runs, this comes naturally to you. But it's very likely that the marketers and even some of the marketing partners like agencies that you'd be working with, this may seem like rocket science to them when it comes to brand building, because our businesses have gone omni-channel a long, long time ago. But unfortunately, the entire subject of marketing, brand building, and consumer engagement is at best operating at a multi-channel level today, where you are building brand experiences for customers that look somewhat like this. You're throwing at her simultaneously your creative strategy, your media strategy, your digital strategy, your activation strategy, your PR strategy, and so on and so forth. And it's like throwing 20 balls at her, hoping she'll catch one, and when that works, you will quickly conclude, you know what, my marketing campaign worked, but you would never know. You would know that half of the money you spent worked, you just won't know which half. And that also leads down to, and if some of you are actually thinking about building a marketing organization, please do not go ahead and build it exactly the way the legacy companies do. Do not think a media manager, a brand manager, a communications manager, an activation manager, don't think channel expertise. You will need channel experts, but reorganize your marketing department in a way, just the way you've probably already reorganized your product departments, to function, think, and deliver omni-channel. Please organize your marketing department to be able to do that, and please expect your partners to be organized this way as well. Otherwise, you'll end up talking to this woman who's used to an omni-channel experience almost like this. I want to talk about this. It's a very, very small brand. It's a rice company called India Gate, and exactly 3 weeks ago, we've launched a brand called Quinoa for them. And it's been done with a fraction of what foods as a category spends are used to. But the interesting bit, and this is where the entire sort of dividend of thinking omnichannel starts coming into play, is the moment your content, your communication, your conversations, your experiences, and your utilities are all connected with each other, you are able to build purchase intent a lot faster. And in categories where it's possible, it may not be possible for all, but in categories where it's possible, you can even downright link it to commerce. So some of these screenshots, I don't have a pretty video because this campaign is still rolling out, but it's as simple as we're using simple Facebook posts to drive traffic to Amazon, where you're selling the product within the 2-click environment, down to meaningful experiences of the other challenge of category adoption, which is going to be, okay, you've sold me quinoa as a healthy grain, what do I do with it? So there is a leg of content where people are talking about Indian recipes where the usual grains are being substituted by quinoa. There are experiences, content, conversations, some ads which are coming up on television soon, but everything is working towards the habit change of getting people used to a quinoa lifestyle, and each one of them is directly linked to purchase, something you couldn't do even 5 years ago. So enough spiel, and I'm stating the obvious here, right? We do live in an experience economy. It's not the reputation economy where the equity of your brand can see you through everything. What is it that, so if you were to hire a CMO tomorrow, how should you possibly define success for his or her role? So that, like her UK counterpart, she doesn't want to quit in the next 12 months. And again, if you really think about it, it's not just down to your CMO. It also includes your CEO, your founder, and every CXO in your organization. And we need to realize that while the functions that each one of them may be playing might be different, the purpose with which, or the goalpost with which we need to literally look at the impact they are making in the organization, there is actually just one yardstick, which is CX. Pardon the eye there. I think the fonts are all over the place. But essentially, the success of any function in the organization should be answered with one question alone. Is it playing a role in improving the customer experience or not? And as long as you build your entire CXO group or your leadership team with that intent, chances are you're on the right road to building brands. And remember, we started by dissing marketing, right? So there's one guy in history who actually came to the marketeer's rescue. Peter Drucker, who's probably a bigger voice than all the other voices we spoke about earlier. And if you do it right, and if you do it with the intent of building delightful customer experiences, you would realize that innovation and marketing are the only two things that matter. Everything else, no matter how important it may seem on the P&L of an organization, are essentially costs. Thank you very much.